Stop, you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now, we have new stories every day. Now let's go. I just received the report from the private detective. This is the fourth investigation in as many years. Jason Thomas, the private detective, just completed it. Over the past 4 years, I've used 4 different private firms collecting random cities, times of the year, etc., thinking that my wife and her lover had outsmarted the previous investigators. But this new detective has uncovered their deceit. I just spoke on the phone with Mr. Thomas. He told me that his team here and his colleagues in Dallas have been observing my wife, Molly, and John Decker for a week, both when they were in their office for the first 4 days of the week and in Dallas, where they attended a work seminar for 3 days. My wife, Molly, was the administrative assistant to John Decker, the CEO of a subsidiary of a large international holding company. As his administrator and assistant, she usually traveled with him, and he traveled a lot. Mr. Thomas said he would send a written report, but overall he noted, during the 4 days here before the trip to Dallas, they were watched and observed. They had lunch together all 4 days and then immediately returned to work. On the second day, they went to a local bar after work. Each had 2 drinks, then went home separately. Their spouses were home when they arrived, and we see surveillance, assuming the spouses would be aware of their activities until the next morning. On the remaining 3 days, they both went straight home from work, and their spouses were there when they arrived. The trip to Dallas was not much more interesting. Each of the 3 days, they attended the work seminar as they were supposed to. Every evening, they had dinner together and then went dancing. After about an hour of dancing and drinking, they went to their separate hotel rooms and did not leave until the morning. Their rooms were separated by 10 other rooms, so there was no connecting door between them. A camera pointed down the hallway showed that neither of them left their rooms until the next morning. The only thing that was suspicious was their dancing. My agent described it as the dancing of 2 people in love. There were no inappropriate touches, but there was definitely closeness, and he usually held her all the way to their table. They were followed to the airport, and the agent confirmed that they'd boarded the plane and that it actually flew home. 4 reports from private detectives over random dates in the past 4 years have found mostly the same information. Nothing. Molly and I are both 36 years old, and we have been married for 10 years. We were exclusive during the last 3 years of college and got married shortly after graduating. Molly is not beautiful, but she could be considered a cute doll with a fantastic 168 centimeters body. She is very sociable, and people enjoy having her around. Her boss, John Decker, is about my height, 185 centimeters, and weighs 85 kilograms. But if it came down to the 2 of us, John, not me, would attract all the girls' attention. He is quite an attractive man. I have spoken to Molly several times about her apparent closeness with John Decker. The first few times, she said there was nothing between them except work. She promised that she would never fool around behind my back and even offered to take a lie detector test anytime I wanted. She said they were just colleagues and good friends. But last time we talked about it, she called him a special friend. I think he got a promotion. Molly and I have gone out for dinner and dancing with John and his wife, Gail, several times. John and Molly talk to each other and dance with each other much more than with us, their spouses. Once, when John and Molly went to the dance floor, I noticed Gail raise an eyebrow as if to say, "What again?" I think she notices their closeness too. I suggested to Molly that she find another job just for my peace of mind, simply because I am very jealous of how close she is with John. She says, "That's silly, she loves her job," and she reassures me again that she would never act behind my back and that she would be willing to take a lie detector test. Over the past 4 years, I have spent thousands of dollars on private detectives and found nothing. Last night, Molly was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked by. In a more serious tone than usual, she said, "Tom, can I talk to you for a minute?" When I sat down, she said that John and Gail had invited us to their lake house for the weekend. I told them that I was sure we would be happy to go, but I'd have to check with you. I think it would be great. Do you mind? The first thought that came to my mind was that 5 days a week at work wasn't enough. Now she wants to be with him on the weekends too. I tried, but I couldn't come up with a reason not to go. With obvious reluctance, I said, "Okay." On Friday afternoon, Molly and I packed our things into the car and headed to John and Gail's lake house. We had a map showing how to get there, but I tried to catch her off guard by asking, "Have you been there before?" She said she hadn't, but I wasn't sure if I believed her. We drove about 50 miles and finally arrived at the lake around 4 o'clock. It took some time to find their house, but when we finally did, 4 people were waiting for us on the porch. The only one I knew was John. I assumed Gail was inside. In addition to John, the welcoming committee consisted of a very large, well-built man, a middle-aged woman who appeared to be his wife, and an extremely attractive woman in her 20s. She had long red hair, and I would consider her beautiful. Everyone except her was in shorts and t-shirts. She was wearing a tiny bikini. We parked and headed to the porch. After we were introduced to everyone, I asked John where Gail was. He says she wasn't there but didn't explain why. I found it a bit strange that we had come to visit John and Gail, yet Gail wasn't there. Probably because I had been thinking about Molly and John's relationship for years, my spider senses started tingling. Could John be fooling around with this beautiful young woman? Did Gail find out about it? What does Molly know about this young lady? Molly didn't seem at all surprised to see her here. Molly and I were shown to our room. We dropped off the small amount of luggage we had brought with us, then joined the others in the great room. The building and interior were nice. I would guess there were 5 bedrooms and just as many bathrooms. The very large man, who introduced himself as Larry something or other, asked if I wanted a beer. I said sure, and he gestured for me to follow him to the kitchen. It seemed he really wanted to engage me in a one-on-one conversation, so I talked with him for about 10 to 15 minutes. He was a very pleasant person, but after a while, I was ready to join the others. Strangely, when we returned to the great room, he loudly announced, "We're back." Even stranger. Molly and John were standing in the corner, and I could have sworn they looked startled. Both of them were red-faced and seemed to be stepping away from each other. I didn't like anything I had seen so far. Gail isn't here. Larry seemed intent on getting me to talk with him in the kitchen. Who was this stunning young woman? Molly seemed to be cozying up with John. I had asked Molly what the hell was going on. So I went back to the kitchen and gestured for Molly to follow me. She had to see that I was at least confused and probably very upset. Instead of following me to the kitchen, Molly stopped and asked John if there was a private place where we could talk. No one seemed surprised by this request. At that moment, my spider senses were blazing. John pointed us to a room we could use, and Molly and I went in and closed the door. "Molly, what the hell is going on?" She had a look on her face as if she finally had to confront something she was afraid to talk about. "Tom, I haven't been completely honest with you about this weekend, but please let me explain everything without interrupting. When I'm done, I'll answer any questions you have, and I'm sure you'll have many. First of all, Gail decided not to come this weekend. Gail, John, and I had several meetings over lunch planning this weekend. When I finish, I think you'll understand why you weren't invited to those meetings. This is mostly Gail's idea, with some input from John and me. John accepted a promotion that will require him to move to England. He and Gail will be moving in 2 weeks. He will be replaced by a woman from the Cleveland office. I'm sure you'll like that John is leaving and being replaced by a woman. There are 2 things I need to tell you about John and me. First, as I have always told you, John and I never had an affair. We were never together in bed. Secondly, and this is the hardest thing I've ever had to tell you, I love you as much as I always have, but I'm also in love with John. Let me emphasize, I didn't just say, I love John, but I'm also in love with John. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I jumped to my feet and yelled, I can't believe this. You brought me to this jerk's house to tell me you're leaving me for this jerk. I'm leaving and you can find your own way home. Oh right, we don't have a home anymore. You're moving to England with this jerk? I headed for the door when Molly grabbed my arm and shouted, Please, Tom, that's not what I said at all. Please sit down and let me finish. I love you and I'm not leaving you ever. You are my husband and I will be with you until death do us part. I sat down again. Let me repeat, this is mostly Gail's idea. I think the next thing I need to do, before continuing why we are here this weekend, is to tell you who the other people are and why they are here. The nice man you talked to in the kitchen is Larry. He is the head of security for our company and is here just to make sure everyone is happy. So he's here to keep me in check, right? Molly didn't answer. She just continued introducing the others. Jackie, the beautiful girl, is here for you if you want. She's sweet and also a high-class escort. Janet is actually Larry's wife and an excellent cook. Suddenly, a light went on in my head. The rest of this charade suddenly became perfectly clear. I could see exactly what Molly, John, and Gail had planned. Molly knew that John would disappear from her life after this weekend. The 2 lovers, John and Molly, would spend the weekend finally being together as lovers. After that, John and his wife Gail would go off on their adventure to England. On Sunday, after I watched my wife make love to someone else all weekend, she and I would hold hands, happily skip to our car, and live happily ever after. Is this woman crazy? They brought Larry to make sure I didn't harm John or accidentally hurt my unfaithful wife. Jackie is here to offer me sex. All of this is to give John and Molly a weekend of love and sex. Molly, I don't agree with any of this crap. Where the hell is Gail? You say this is all her idea. Where the hell is she? She decided that for her emotional well-being, it would be better if she wasn't here. In exchange for the weekend, John signed a postnuptial agreement stating that if he and I have any contact of any kind in the future, John gets nothing in the divorce and Gail receives 100% of the assets. I signed a similar document for you. Both documents take effect when John and Gail leave for England. Since John and I work together, both documents also stipulate that there will be no sexual or romantic contact between us from this Sunday evening until the day they leave for England. Tom, I will truly be completely yours after this weekend, and I swear to spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I am causing you now. Why am I here if Gail isn't? You would never have agreed to let me come to John's lake house without you. For the same reason, you weren't invited to the planning lunches. You would have just said, hell no to everything. What if I just say no to all this damn nonsense right now and ask you to either join me for an immediate trip home or stay here with John and say goodbye to our marriage? Tom, it's not like that. Please understand that while you are my soulmate for life, I need this weekend with John for closure. Besides, Gail is waiting for your call. Since this is primarily her idea, she will explain everything to you. Her number is on the kitchen table. Molly, I'm asking you once more not to do this. If you go through with this, we're done. Molly came over to me, kissed me passionately on the lips, and then said, everything will be fine, you'll see. Then, without listening to my objections, Molly left the room, took John's waiting hand, and they disappeared from view. Larry kept a close eye on me for the rest of the evening, always staying between me and John. I seriously considered just leaving and filing for divorce, but I needed to know what all this meant and how far it would go. Words cannot describe my state of mind. I was furious. I wanted to hurt this bastard and my unfaithful wife badly. Realizing I couldn't take on Larry, I pretended to almost accept my fate and just wait for the weekend to be over. I found Jackie and said to her, you are very tempting, but I'm not going to help Molly break our wedding vows. Molly will have to do that herself. I told Jackie that as far as I was concerned, she could go home, or if she was curious, she could stay and laugh at all this madness. The next time I saw the lovers was at dinner. Janet had apparently been told how to seat everyone. John sat at the head of the table, with Molly next to him. Larry was seated between me and John, and Jackie was beside me. Janet, when she wasn't serving, sat across from her husband, Larry. I assumed that by now my beautiful wife had become an adulteress, thus making me a cuckold. I noticed, probably at John's suggestion, that she wasn't wearing her wedding rings. The only thing I did throughout the meal was point to her bare finger. After dinner, Jackie put on a beautiful red bikini and went for a swim. I sat by the pool, contemplating the rightness of my decision not to take advantage of her services. Then John and Molly came out, holding hands in their swimwear. Larry sat next to me and tried to start a conversation. It became abundantly clear that this whole charade had been prearranged. He watched my every move, making it clear that nothing good would come to me if I made any move toward my unfaithful wife and her lover. Soon after everyone gathered by the pool, Molly came over and sat next to me. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, I love you, Tom. It will all work out. We'll talk when we get back home. I thought, this woman is crazy. I quickly stood up and walked away, loudly enough for everyone to hear, go to hell, you wretch. Tears sprang from Molly's eyes, but she didn't respond to me. For the rest of the evening, I avoided everyone except Larry, of course. He was always somewhere nearby, keeping an eye on me. I decided to call Gail. Maybe she could shed some light on this train wreck. She must have been expecting my call because she answered on the first ring. She must have added me to her caller ID. In a sad voice, she asked, how is this sad affair going? Are you still at the lake house? Gail, what the hell made you come up with this disaster? I don't know about you and John, but it has destroyed my marriage with Molly. Tom, let me explain what I was thinking. I admit, I was considering my own marriage with John. I didn't think too much about you and Molly. I believe that women can move on and forgive infidelity more easily than men. I know that John deeply loves Molly and has suffered for 4 years because she refused to have sex with him. She always told him that she wouldn't have a cheap affair behind your back. I proposed a compromise, a weekend of sex and love in exchange for them never contacting each other again. I couldn't imagine them being thousands of miles apart but in constant communication. I was afraid of what that might lead to. If they ever connect in the future, in any way, it could destroy each of us. I didn't invite you to the planning lunches because you would have just said no to everything. And to you, wretch, go to hell and be sure that things won't go as you planned, I growled and ended the call. Entering our bedroom, I found, unsurprisingly, that the only love Easter was mine. Molly's things had been moved, so it was no longer our bedroom, just my bedroom. It made me very sad to think that Molly and John were now in their bedroom. Lying in bed, I kept wondering how Molly could think that after this weekend, we could just magically resume our loving relationship. All I could assume was that their 4-year emotional affair, though not sexual, made them think the world owed them something and that everyone would understand their needs. I couldn't sleep and stayed alert, listening to everything happening around me. Around midnight, Jackie knocked on my door and came in to ask if I was okay. She also reminded me that she was still available if needed. I thanked her for the offer and said that turning it down was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But no, thank you. She said she regretted my decision. I quietly went out to the pool. The hot tub was separated from the pool by a 3-foot stone wall, so I found a lounge chair, dragged it to the tub, and quietly settled in. Naturally, my guard was probably sleeping in his room near the bedroom of the adulterers, and he was nowhere to be seen. I waited an hour or so, then suddenly heard voices approaching the pool. I immediately recognized the voices of the two lovers. They couldn't see me, but I was only 10 feet away from them, hidden behind the short stone wall. Molly said, "Oh, John, this is so wonderful. I've loved you for so long, and finally, I can show you how much. I'll miss you, but we have 2 days to spend in love and remember for a lifetime. Let's undress and make love in the pool. Take off your clothes. I'll get us a couple of drinks." Molly stood up and went to the kitchen to get drinks. I hated him, and I hated Molly for the absolute emptiness I felt. Finally, the moment I had endured the whole day's humiliation from this jerk and my cheating wife, had arrived. John was naked and waiting for Molly when I approached him from behind. I shouted loudly enough for everyone in the house to hear me, "H-E-Y, asshole." Asshole seemed to have become my nickname for him. When he turned around, the white-hot rage I had been storing all day surged through my veins with adrenaline, and I kicked him, hoping with all my might to completely ruin his experience of sex with my wife. He doubled over and fell backward into the pool. I knew that Larry would soon get out of bed and come after me, but I didn't think there would be a physical confrontation with him. He might yell at me, but he wouldn't want to face assault charges, and in any case, the damage to his boss was already done, and Larry wouldn't seek revenge. It registered in my mind that Molly ran to check on John's condition, but didn't bother to check on me. I had seen enough. Everything I had planned after hearing from my cheating wife was done, so there was nothing left to keep me here. I grabbed my bag, got in the car, and drove home. However, before leaving, I did one thing. I took off my wedding ring and left it on the kitchen table. Molly would probably understand that our marriage was over. I spent the rest of the weekend sitting at home in a recliner, staring at the TV. I wasn't really paying attention to what was on the screen. My mind was occupied with images of my beautiful wife with that jerk John. Since I had been at the lake house and knew the layout, I could picture them in various rooms, embracing with wide smiles, kissing as they held each other, and her in bed with him, doing what should have been only for me. I wondered what she would say when she came home, if she came home at all. I really hoped she wouldn't come back, but I didn't know where else she could go. On Sunday evening, a car pulled up and stopped in front of my house. It was John and Molly. John got out of the car, intending to walk over and open her door. He probably asked Molly to wait and let him open the door for her, obviously to humiliate me. I think he forgot that the human body stiffens after an injury and a long drive. He winced as he got out of his door, still feeling the kick I gave him 2 days ago. He had to hold onto the car's fenders to walk around the side. Finally, he reached her and awkwardly opened her door. He helped Molly out of the car. Moreover, Molly helped John help her out of the car. I was glad that my parting shot at the lake house had obviously disrupted their lovemaking. This whole display was meant to show me that he was returning her to me after she had chosen to stay with him over me at the lake house. They embraced each other like lovers, not caring what I or the neighbors might think. I had enough. I opened the front door and took a step toward John. "Asshole, if you don't get out of here in 5 seconds, I'll do more than just kick you again." John, limping, quickly returned to his car and drove away. I went back inside and sat in my recliner. Molly didn't even watch him leave. She walked through the front door with a fake smile on her face. "I'm home, honey." Her behavior seemed so absurd, as if she had just returned from a girls' night out. I simply ignored her and continued watching TV. She approached and tried to kiss me, but I pushed her away. The only thing I said to her was, "From now on, you're in the guest bedroom. Tomorrow, I'm going to see a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings. In case you forgot, the house was mine before we got married, and your name isn't on any of the documents, so think about where you'll go to live by tomorrow. You can start packing your things. Don't try to say anything to me. From this moment on, I won't be speaking to you, and all our communication will be through lawyers. From now on, you can be free to replace your lost lover with whomever you want." I went back to watching TV. Molly's shoulders slumped as she realized that reconciliation was impossible. She cried bitterly as she went up the stairs. In one weekend, she had lost both her lover and her husband. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.